World Cup campaigns have multitudes. Unlike bilateral series, there will be ups and downs. As we've already seen in the first match of India, it almost got scuttled by America. A slightly more tougher opposition, a more experienced opposition, might have reversed the results. Therefore, should India have a plan B? And what I mean by this is, they play with a all-dominating top 8 batsmen. Should they have a plan B? Do they have the arsenal to create a plan B if they lose upfront wickets, which is likely in a World Cup tournament? So first, let me tell you about the two types of innings that have taken place at different World Cups with equal kind of successes. The first is the dominant performance by individual players, which have resulted in defining that World Cup victories. The first in this is what I call the King's Coronation. It's the 1979 World Cup final played between England and West Indies. England had scuttled the top 4 wickets of the West Indians, and they thought they had a good chance to win. But somebody had a different plan. The King, Viv Richards, chewing his gum, walked in, had different ideas. One of the first few balls that he faced, he goes across the wicket and tongs one over mid-wicket for a 6. After that, 139 runs, and West Indies had almost sealed England's fate. That is innings 1. Innings 2 is something that we Indian fans know very well. That is what decided our 1983 World Cup campaign. We were 17 for 5 in Turnbridge. It's called a Turnbridge turnaround. The magnificent Kapil walks in, 16 fours, 6 sixes, hits the highest individual ODI score at that point of time, 175 not out, defines the victory in that match. And not only that match, but created momentum for India to go on to win that World Cup. The third innings, a dominant innings that I'd like to talk to you about, is the 2003 innings. It's called the Centurion Storm. It involved Sachin Tendulkar. India was playing arch nemesis at that point of time, Pakistan, which had probably the most fearsome fast bowling attack in Shoaib Akhtar, who was clocking around 160 kilometers per hour at that point of time. The experienced Wasim and Waqar were there, and in walks in Sachin Tendulkar, faces Shoaib Akhtar, uppercuts him for a 6, and then 98 runs later, India has defined the path for its success. It didn't win us the World Cup, but took us all the way to the finals. But never has India seen such a dominant performance from Sachin against that fearsome Pakistan attack. He absolutely cut loose. There was no caution. Very, very dominant innings. The fourth innings in this, I would like to mention, is the squash ball turnaround, where, the 2007 World Cup final, marred by rain, had Australia face Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka had a little bit of momentum going for it. Their spinners were doing well, but Gilchrist had other ideas, batting right on top. He came in with a unique squash ball tucked in his gloves, and that helped him grip the bat so that the bat would not slip. He scored a magnificent century. The Sri Lankan spinners looked like club cricketers. Magnificent victory with a very, very dominant, attack. These are 4 dominant innings that basically defined very, very successful World Cup campaigns. But there is another format of batting that also creates victories. And in that, there are 2 innings that I would like to mention. One is the 99 World Cup. The grit and determination of Steve Waugh, the tenacity of Australia was defined over there. Playing against a very, very dominant South Africa, who were the best team till that point of time. He walks in, takes body blows, plays a very gritty innings, scores a century, and actually wins the match for Australia. In fact, he also had his legendary sledge for Herschel Gibbs, who dropped him. And that has become famous now, where when Herschel Gibbs dropped him mid-innings, he looked at Herschel and said, "Son, you've just dropped the World Cup." Well, that is one innings of grit. The second is probably one of the greatest Indian victories ever. Involved MS Dhoni, the 2011 World Cup final. Dhoni walked into the final having not scored a single 50 in that entire campaign. But, his grit and determination and his tactical acumen saw him promote himself ahead of Yuvraj Singh to blunt Sri Lanka's most potent weapon, Muttiah Muralidharan. Dhoni created a magnificent chase. That was not a chase full of dominance, etc., but it was a lot of grit, determination, and tactical acumen. So these are 2 kinds of innings. Now, suppose India in this campaign, like happened with the USA, faces a situation where they've lost their, dominant top front, right? Ishan Kishan, Abhishek Sharma, and it's not going to happen. Most often, more than not, these fellows are going to just finish off the matches. But if suppose, you lose these wickets against a stronger opposition, like it happened against America, does India have the arsenal to create a plan B where somebody plays, the innings of caution, grit and build up? And I think yes. And those two players that are identified and who've done it recently in the last two World Cup campaigns for India are Axar, Patel and Hardik, Pandya. Their experience and their talent should see them play these roles where, they adopt themselves depending on the situation. If, India has had an all-conquering innings, where Abhishek and Ishan and Tilak have fired, then they don't need to play that kind of an innings. But say we lose up in any of these matches, and the two players who can play the innings of grit and determination are Pandya and Axar.